That's Roy Schwartz.
And this is Danny Fingeroth.
And we want to start with, can you tell us why parks and playgrounds are so important in New York City?
Well, New York is a super urban environment. There's not even back alleys here. So to find a patch of green or a playground, it's a very special thing for New York.
And yet we cherish them. We have Central Park, one of the most beautiful parks in the world. We have Poe Park around us, which is a small gem in the middle of this urban chaos.
So, why are we here on this particular day at Poe Park? Besides me inviting you.
Well, I mean, today is, people out there should know this is about the 30th time we've rescheduled this, but by an amazing coincidence, because we're all so busy at work, but by an amazing coincidence, we are here today on Milton Figure, as he was born, birthday of the co-creator, Ben.
Should we introduce who we are? Is that from the name? Is that?
I can put your stuff, but you can do it however you want. You can do it again, or I can cut it back in. So introduce yourself again, however you feel comfortable.
Okay, we're gonna wait for the car alarm to end, otherwise you're gonna get all that in the sound, right?
I am. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
The cooler with the sunglasses.
Turn right back. And that's gonna be in the video.
For sure.
So yeah, go ahead and reintroduce yourself, and we'll go back to the question. If you want to say, and Roy,
my name is Roy Schwartz. I write pop culture and pop culture history for Slater.com, IGN, The Forward, a bunch of places, and I am the author of Is Superman Circumcised, which I'm proud to say is the hottest book title in the world for 2021.
I'm Danny Fingeroth. I was a long-time writer and editor at Marvel Comics. I've written books about comics, including Superman on the Couch, what superheroes really tell us about ourselves and our society, and Disguised as Clark Kent, Jewish comics, Each Superhero. I've recently written the biography of Stan Lee, the co-creator of Marvel Universe, and I have a book coming out in November of 2023, 60th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination biography of Jack Ruby, the guy who shot Harvey Oswald and killed him on nationwide television.
So we're back, we're here because it's Bill Finger's birthday, and not only that, but why it's his birthday, but why are at Poe Park on his birthday? What happened here besides the fact of the Poe cottage? That's what I want you to say.
We're in what had been the Jewish Bronx of the 1930s, and Bill Finger and Bob Kane were fellow graduates of Billy Clinton High School, where Stan Lee and Will Eisner and many people in comics and many other fields went Lerner and/or Lowe. I always forget which one, Rogers and/or Happenstein.
Baldwin, right?
James Baldwin, or with Hazen. Remember him from the Dundee newspapers here. Anyway, it's an illustrious part of the city, and so these guys were acquaintances more than friends, I think. But Bob Kane was a cartoonist, and he is just kind of been told that Superman was a big hit. We need something to follow it up, and he came up with a general idea for something called Batman. And he met up with his friend Bill Finger, who was a writer, and together, many of the concepts that he was Batman came to Bill Finger, but together the two of them would meet in Poe Park to discuss the characters and storylines, because they both lived around here.
As Danny said, this was a predominantly Jewish neighborhood back in the 30s, Bob Kane was born Robert Kahn, and Bill Finger was Milton Finger. As legend has it, they developed Batman over one weekend, walking around Poe Park and hashing ideas. Um, Bob Kane came up with the name Batman, and purportedly was inspired by Leonardo da Vinci's ornithopter, those end glider bat-like wings. And
Reportedly is the important part.
right, everything with Mr. Kane is purported. We'll leave it at that. And his original design was a red bodysuit and black trunks and blonde hair and this kind of little domino mask. And Bill Finger pretty much contributed everything else: the costume, the background, the origins, the villains, Gotham City, the gadgets, the art.
Well, that Bill Finger had read the Shadow stories. That became the first. That,
Chemical Syndicate.
comic books were well, the medium had been around for a long time, but the superhero was relatively new since, or Superman. There's much debate, of course, about what the first, like everything, but Superman was a big hit the year before. And so they took a rich piece of the Shadow into pieces of this cult character, that serial character. They kind of pushed it together stuff from the big sheet. And, the superhero in general is kind of an amalgam kind of genre. It takes a little bit from here and there, from science fiction and romance and detective. There's a lot of film noir kind of influence on Batman, but it's a creation of two very urban people, young people. Um, there's arguably a Jewish undertone to Batman, darker shadow to Superman, being created shortly after Kristallnacht in Germany. A lot of different influences, including the two guys putting it together with creative geniuses. That helped too. And they put it all together, and look, we're the shadow of Edgar Allan Poe too. So much of history and horror, shadows.
It works, right? He created detective fiction, basically. So it really works. Batman debuted in Detective Comics 27, May 1939. And as Danny said, Batman was really the second real superhero. Superman was the first. The superheroes, we defined them. Batman was the second, and he was the yin to Superman's yang. And every superhero since is more or less on the spectrum between those two, the alpha and the omega. I think it's just rehashing from that point.
I was going to ask you about that, like the influence, because Poe created the detective story, the modern, in a sense. So, like, how you kind of answered it already, but how do you think Edgar Allan Poe influenced Bill Finger and Bob Kane in their kind of either indirectly or directly?
Well, the Finger, I think, was an omnivorous reader. He had a very fertile imagination and a mind like a sponge in a good way, Um, and so he was a voracious reader. I don't know about Kane. Kane had been doing mostly sort of funny animal gay comic strips. His famous something called Peter Pup, and I forget. Of course, and so I think maybe Finger probably had the more serious consciousness and had I'm guessing read more. Although the Whit Clinton in the tradition of the great old New York high school gave kids a pretty, and I have to say Clinton was an all boys school, so for better or worse there were no distractions. As far as to impress girls at the school. I'm sure in real life they did it, and there was a sister school named Waltham that was nearby. Bronx Science just got started in 1938. I don't know if they would have known many kids in Bronx Science. And so I have a feeling that Finger brought the more intellectual, and my sense is that Bill maybe was a little dark and brooding himself.
Concur with my esteemed colleague. At the very least, Edgar Allan Poe, in creating detective story as we define it, inspired Sir Arthur Conan Doyle in creating Sherlock Holmes. And Sherlock Holmes is a direct exploration. One of the many influences that Bill Finger credited before creating Batman, along with the Shadow, Zorro, Bat Whispers, the Black Bat, and myriad others. But that's the beautiful thing about Batman. He was this kind of Frankenstein's monster cobbled together from other influences, but ended up being better than all of them. And that's the beauty of it. But yes, Poe directly or indirectly, that DNA found its way into Batman in some way.
And why is Batman such an awesome character and resonates to this day and is more popular than ever?
You know, I give a lot of talks and teach a lot about comics. And one day I was moderating a panel about Batman. And I kind of had this inspiration, and I kind of doodled on my notebook. I made a line down, and an arc, and then not line up, and a line down, and then drew a little chant at the eyelids. And I said, here, I just drew this really lousy but instantly recognizable picture of Batman, which any 4-year-old could do. And that's part of it. It's so elemental. That design that the two of them came up with, and it's true. They came up with a lot of the concepts, but came hip hop. And then they had brilliant artists, musician, the artist, the writer, Joker, Robin the Boy.
Is he from the Bronx?
Robin?
No.
Robinson was, but Robinson had a similar story. Robinson was from Schwartz, and his story goes, his origin story goes back to meeting with famous Jewish opera star Jan Pierce in a cantor, and this is very something to do with Batman. Paid and figure pen on a Catskills type resort, but not in the Catskills in New Jersey. And Jerry was walking around with a jacket with lines that he had done on, and that was the style of the time, I think I like to say. And Bob Kane, they met at the tennis court at this resort. You know, Jerry was about to start college, and he spent the entire summer peddling an ice cream truck around, peddling a good Uber truck. His mother said, "You're all skin and bones. You know, you need to take the money you made and go to
The ice cream.
oh, I was that ain't gonna be it was profits." So he meets Bob Kane at this resort, and they hit it off, and he immediately eyes of the sister on Batman at the wrong way. So he and Singer, you know, success has many parents, but somewhere along the way, he and Singer came up with the Joker, you know, and it was mostly Jerry Robbins, and then Robin the Boy wondered. So the Singer was, I'm sorry, Robinson was from New Jersey, but he had a classic comic book creator story. Here's a story that many comic book creators have in common. Some were just plain poor, right? Nobody rich became a comic book creator in those days. So either they started out poor, or what's more common, you know, not unlike the loss of the planet Krypton or the loss of Bruce Wayne's parents, is very often they were from well-to-do families that lost everything. Usually the Depression. There's this common thread of the Jewish comic book creators of that generation, that they seemed like, oh, it's pretty good. I've grown up and pretty pampered. You know, I have a chauffeur. Next day, we got nothing. Sorry. So that I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Jerry's father, like all movie theaters in New Jersey, and then just one day it all went away.
I think Danny's touching on something really interesting here, and that was part of that existential angst that it gave birth, whether it's the origin of Superman or the origin of Batman. You have people come here from the old country, the old world, where they're subject to pogroms and massacres. They come to America for the first time in 20 generations. They have full legal rights anywhere for the first time in 200 years or whatever. They start to prosper. They start to do well. They have freedom to do so. All of a sudden, the depression, everything gets taken from them. Rise of Nazism, both in Europe and here. There's this very palpable, real, daily existential angst. And I can very much see a direct line from that to these origin stories, these tragic origin stories which are now sort of the sine qua non. Every superhero almost has some parent that got taken from them in a tragic fact. All of them, right? All orphans, half orphans, or whatever. I think it comes to a large extent from this.
Yeah,
You concur?
you know, they're metaphors for loss and trauma. Uh, you know, and they sort of acted out in that totemic way, where kind of Superman experiences the loss of his entire civilization. Batman witnesses, you know, the loss of his parents. I mean, you know, it goes as continues with Spider-Man, right? Who was a free before we even meet Peter Parker, he's an orphan, right? He's living with his elderly aunt and uncle, and then you know he's twice orphaned with his uncle being killed. You know, the way that he perceives as being his fault, even though that's a highly neurotic way to do it. But you know, there you go.
Is it
There it
the
comes.
And Bill Finger, who co-created Batman, also co-created Green Lantern. And there we see also a tragic origin, a train wreck, everybody's dying, he dies, he survives, he finds a lantern. I mean, that origin story is more bonkers. I don't know if you know it's a ancient Chinese, it's a meteorite that could talk, that landed in ancient China, then got fashioned into a Chinese lantern. He finds this thing, makes a ring out of it.
Where does he find it? Does he find it in the New York subway?
No, it's a train, and it's never underground. It's an above-ground train,
Okay.
and it crashes, and he survives because of the train, because of the lantern. It's never explained in the original comic why it chose him.
So
And
there's
it talks to him.
no subway involved.
There's no subway.
Okay.
And it chooses him, right? Alan Scott. We're not pre-Al Jordan. And he fashions a ring out of it. He puts this, even for the era, very flamboyant outfit. And he becomes the Green Lantern.
A lot of that's Bill Finger. A lot of that is Marty Nodell, of course. Too.
Yes, of course.
And then the other, I'm sorry.
So, and he did Pillsbury Doughboy later on.
You know, he never claimed that he invented it, but I think he helped develop it.
He oversaw the team. Yeah.
And then the other thing that Bill Finger did was when there were Hayden did a character called Wildcat, who had been a boxer, and then became. I don't remember his full arc, but that's very interesting too because that was the year when boxing was a Jewish sport. You know, boxing was the way out of the ghetto for successive ethnic groups and racial groups, and at that point, in 1920, it was the way out of poverty for the children of Jewish immigrants. It was such a Jewish sport that there were non-Jewish fighters claiming they were Jewish just so they would be popular.
Before it was desegregated, boxing was a Jewish sport. All the world champions were Jewish. Now, you know, more period.
Including the father of Jethro, Beverly Hillbillies. He was Max Baer Jr., Max Baer Sr. You know, was one of those. Although I think he was one of those guys that might have been half Jewish, but maybe he was just more popular.
To this day, everybody knows Betty Leonard. You know, the names are still here century.
And Barney Ross, who ties into Jack Ruby, because Barney Ross, right, was not who was from Chicago, but he was Jack Ruby's best friend. So somehow we're touching all the different bases here.
There was a very famous back in the day boxer slash wrestler slash karate champion, Raphael Halperin, who at some point just moved to Israel, became an ultra-Orthodox rabbi, opened a chain of glasses, and now half of Europe can buy glasses from his chain. It's the strangest stories.
In Israel?
Yeah.
Well, I never heard.
That's across Europe as a chain.
What was the early days of comic books like for Bill Finger? Because like when they created how new were comic books as an idea, and what was the state of comic books like at the time when Bill Finger and Bob Kane came up with that?
Well, boy, that is a complicated. You know, Superman has come out and there have been comics all along, right? I mean, and you know, the origin of what the first comic was, of course, something that they invented the internet for, right? There's endless debates. But this company called the company that become DC Comics was started by a guy named Major Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson. He had been an adventurer and a military man, and a writer of pulp fiction. And he started this line of comic books. And Siegel and Schuster worked for him, Bob Kane did. At a certain point, he was a, he was a uh, publisher, writer, but not that creditor. And he was squeezed out of our company by what's some Donnerbelt who would go on, was getting us pictures, I think, and then he got it to there. So it was ugly. Uh, they ended up then an editor named Sheldon Mayer, and again, here's 100 different stories of Shelley Mayer.
Gonna streamline it for you.
Yeah, it's the streamliner, magical author. Shelley Mayer found in the slush pile Superman, and done by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, who's been doing Slam Bradley and Dr. Occult, I think, and then does different things. And everybody thought
involved.
Henry involved, that's right. And they thought that Superman was too outlandish. So somehow they felt, here's this thing. Mayer loves it. He advocated for it. He his forces. And so Superman comes out. It becomes this interesting. It becomes like all the killer apps of comics. Comics were around. Comics were popular. Superman was in this day of where every movie was black and white, and not too long before they'd all been silent. But there was no color. There was no special. Even there was special effects, but nothing that could achieve the imaginative powers. So the superhero becomes, this genre, and so the editors at DC tell their freelancers, including Bob Kane, we'll look at the next Superman, and every other company too, and so these were the children of immigrants, largely Jewish, but also the basic Godfather trilogy of Italian and Irish, with a few black and Hispanic people in the mix, some Asian people in the mix, but a largely Jewish business. People who are from desperately poor backgrounds, parents who work in the garment industry, a lot of butchers. I mean, so suddenly they have these children who are American born, American educated, and have a certain amount of writing or drawing talent. And so this comic business can come along, and suddenly these kids are out earning their fathers. Right? If you could draw, even at the lousy rates, and they were lousy rates per page, paid per page, they had no ownership. Again. And so it was, and a lot of comic studios were literally in former garment factories, and they were set up like garment factories. You'd have a writer and a penciler and an inker and a letter, and everybody would be at the same
Switch-overs.
yeah. And it was, to our point of view, it seems very romantic. And maybe if you were 17, 18, 19, 20, I would imagine after you actually were a little older, maybe it was not so romantic, especially when you realize that you didn't own the rights to any of that stuff. But compared to what your father was doing, which was cutting cloth in a garment factory, and you brought the scene, especially in a family that's put the forward to send the kid to college, or just had a kid who was artistic, or just didn't fit into that mold of going to college. It was kind of amazing, but ultimately a very exploitive business.
To build on what Danny said, just going to set the background. Early 1930s, you don't have comic books. They don't exist yet. You have, not as we know them today, you have comic strips. That's where the art comes from. And you have pulp magazines and pulp novellas, which is where sort of the content comes from. And there's the Great Depression. Right? 1 in 4 people has no comic book. 1 in 70 people are homeless. The average person makes 40-something% less. It's bad. Things are bad. And for Jews, it's worse, because for most of the respectable creative industries, magazines, ad agencies, that kind of stuff, theater won't let them in. It's just absolutely won't let them in. And the comic book was really invented around here as well, in the Bronx. Again, there's a very streamlined version of the story. An out-of-work school teacher named Maxwell Ginsburg, has to move in with his family, back in with his mom in the Bronx, in this area. It's the Jewish Bronx at the time. He cleans the attic, by some versions to get away with his nagging Yiddish mama. He finds all these old newspaper strips that he kept as a kid. Back then, you'd have the comic strips every day in newspaper, and once a week on Sunday, the full page in color. And he reads them, he enjoys them, and sort of a light bulb goes over his head. what if I went to the newspaper syndicates and licensed these old, already printed comic strips, cut and pasted them, and sold them as magazines on newsstands for a dime? They even start that as a promotional product. Wouldn't kids be willing to part with their allowance instead of waiting for mommy and daddy to be finished with the newspaper? So he goes and he does that, and it becomes successful. And a small industry starts. But soon enough, they run out of material. There are only so many strips you can cut, paste, and glue and sell. So they start commissioning new content. And they start branching into new genres. They're called comic books. Originally, they're all comical, funny animals and stuff like Bob Kane used to do. I'm going to wait for the truck to pass.
Be home. Please.
Yeah, it's okay. We'll drive off, and I'll pick up where I stop.
Oh, it really is coming right towards us.
Maybe it's okay.
I'll be after lady.
You got it, time for this.
Where was I?
So they expanded into other genres: detective comics, action comics. And as Danny said, Superman was an idea that got rejected for over 4 years by every newspaper syndicate in the United States, more or less for being too fantastical for kids to ever relate to. There was nothing like it before, right? You had home adventures, you had these swashbucklers and detectives. This is a guy who was wearing long johns and flew through the air. It was completely crazy. But they threw it in, more of a deadline pressure thing than a choice. It was successful, and then they went to Bob Kane, one of their illustrators, and said, make us the new Superman. And he went to Bill Finger and said, help me make the new Superman. And so, Batman.
How has Batman evolved over time?
He started out more like the Shadow. But I think he was pretty much, he was a solo character, and he carried a gun, like the pulp adventures of the time, which he used reluctantly, but he would shoot criminals if there was no other choice. He was alone. He didn't have Robin. That's part of the big innovation, is that I think Robinson and Kane. I don't know how much Figure was involved with that particular. They were a group. The three of them really were a trio, but they realized that Batman would just be talking to himself, so he needed a sidekick. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if in other media there were sidekicks. I have a feeling they probably copied somewhere, but they realized you need somebody to talk to. And I think Jerry claimed that Robin's name had nothing to do with his name of Robinson, but subconsciously I think that. But
Bruce Wayne.
So I'm not all. My memory is not so clear about the exact details. Just Batman needs somebody. I think maybe to temper the unrelenting darkness of the character. But I think he was much like he would be for the next 20 years. But go on, maybe you're such a more reasonable to ability.
I think Batman, part of the charm, aside from the fact that he's so iconic and so elemental and looks so cool, it's part of it. He also speaks to us because he's the highest potential, right? He's just a guy, trained his body and his mind to be the best that he could be, and that's something everybody can find inspirational, aspirational, relatable, etc. And he's always evolved to reflect that to some capacity. So he starts as this kind of reaction to 30s to, to crime and organized crime and urban chaos and this kind of decay of the urban environment, the rise of violence in the world, etc. Then he takes on the Nazis. Then he becomes, like many other superheroes post-war, this kind of patriarchal, almost sanitized figure. And we get to the 60s, and it's all pop art and camp and Warhol, and you get the Adam West Batman show.
Batman. Back and open.
Sure is.
I think we can't overestimate the influence of both. It was something called film noir. But, movies like The Big Sleep, the Maltese Falcon, the Jimmy Cagney and Humphrey Bogart movies of the 30s, uh, and especially, well, the German expressionist films, Caligari, um, but the the senses shattering, and I know that's sort of winking to that, it's kind of like comic book cover copy, but for the comic creators of that generation, Citizen changed everything. Citizen Kane was, we don't think of Citizen Kane as noir necessarily, but the use of shadows, the use of angles, the use of moonlight, just that everything was not even bigger than life, but more dramatic than life. Those guys, through every one of the Batman creators talks about going to see Citizen Kane, like at the first show of the day, and sitting there every show of Citizen Kane, and going to the Museum of Modern Art and seeing the German Expressionist films. But Kane is something they all talk about, including Will Eisner, uh, who was friendly with all these guys and started something called the Spirit, saying newspaper comics book format insert. Eisner's a very important figure in comics history in several different periods, uh, up to and including helping innovate what we think it was the modern quote-unquote graphic novel. But yeah, but the influence of movies in the day when, and radio. The thing that I always forget in teaching and talking about history is how much radio, radio drama, radio comedy, The Shadow, or Jack Benny's, um, Fibber McGee and Molly. Needless to say, there was no television. So you had live theater, you had silent movies, which actually were very expressive, because they had figured out how to move the cameras around. Um, so I think whatever's going on in movies and now in TV that's popular is often reflected in comic. I mean, but it really started, and the pulps were, some comics were this around them. Uh, and so Batman then developed, the characters, the most popular, the superhero fan, had a lot of companies, including the company that would become Marvel. Batman was one of the few survivors of the so-called golden age of the 40s. And so in the Eisenhower era, Batman almost became a spoof of itself. It changed the noir aspects, but then they saw how the Superman books doing well, with riffing on every possible version of Superman. There was Super Baby and Super Boy and Super Girl and Super Dog and Super Cat. And so suddenly Batman had, an imp from another dimension who looked like Batman. And, Batman in different colored costumes, like different women.
There was a cow.
And there was what?
There was a bath cow.
The Bat Cow. I did not know.
Yeah.
There you go. Not a Bat Bull, a Bat Cow. All right. Well, that's
The 60s,
yeah. And so this was my childhood, so I love this stuff. And in retrospect, you look at it and go, it's kind of silly. Which didn't stop me paying my and fish there. So, that sort of proves saying 2012, whatever is coming. But the character definitely got to a point where it was almost a parody of itself. And then the Batman TV show was probably the highest popularity of the character, right? That was, everybody knows that show, but to sort of die-hard comic fans, the show was a travesty. It wasn't like, it was beyond tongue-in-cheek. It was literally a satire. And again, at 8, 12, 13, it's like, we ain't got nothing else superhero-wise. I'm going to watch this show.
I love hate thing.
But sort of, that show was popular, but very briefly. And then it went away. And then sort of, that's when the comics started sort of going back to basics. So that's when Batman became dark, gritty again. And then that ended up becoming a parody of itself. So I think with all these characters, they're evergreen fictional characters that reflect the society and the culture around them. They're what they do this thing where they simultaneously affect the culture and impact the culture, but are also impacted by the culture.
What he said.
Is New York City Gotham?
Yes, I think New York City has got them. I mean, I think that's where I think Finger came up with the name, but because there had been a lot of use of the term Gotham into New York City. I don't remember the exact argument. It goes back to like the 60s.
So legend has it that Finger came up with the name because he was looking through the phone book
Right.
and saw Gotham Jewelers.
Right.
It was. And Gotham City is a nickname for New York, dating back to 1908. Was it 1908? Washington Irving.
Oh,
Yeah, it's before. It's before that. It's before 1908. 1908 is thing of George Bernard Shaw. The 1800s. And what should
back to yours.
Gotham City is an actual nickname for New York City, coined by Washington Irving. It has nothing to do with Gothic, by the way. That's just a homonym. It just sounds the same. Gothic architecture is a nickname given during the Renaissance to European cathedrals and that kind of stuff that were attributed to the Visigoths, the Germanic tribes. So that's where Gothic came from. But this comes from Old Anglo-Saxon, Gatham, goat home.
Right.
Just like the Jewish community has the town of Helm, those kind of stories. In British folklore, there's an actual place called Gatham, goat home, which was it's a village at Yorkshire or one of those kind of places. And legend has it they pretended to be crazy, so King George would pass through the town. And they had a reputation of being insane. So if you call a place Goat Home, Gatham, that was a place, that was a term for the place being full of crazy people. So Washington
That's
Irving,
not Gotham. That like
no, goat. Goat Home. Crazy like goats. That was the story. So New York, the scene was so crazy that Washington Irving called this Gatham, Gotham, and that's what it came to be. So that's the origin of the term Gotham.
Is that where the name Gotham?
Look at that.
Anyway,
That sounds German as well. But anyway, Gotham City phone book.
yeah. So yeah, I think he was, in a certain way. Well, look, obviously, Spider-Man, the Marvel universe is set in a version of New York, and it has been since the 1930s. I used to think of Metropolis as Chicago, but I guess Metropolis sort of has elements.
Are Metropolis and Gotham right across the river from each other? Is that how it works?
Well, but that was
It does not.
that was established 30 years later.
Oh.
That was not anything.
That's not something how I ever imagined.
Yeah, the original, there was no DC universe. DC was a company that had these different characters who there was no interest, there was no thought that the audience would care about the universe of Batman and Superman be coordinated, and that's a relatively modern, that's a Marvel, cartoon, that started as a timely it was a precursor to Marvel. They were doing it there, and then they were doing it in a big way, the Marvel comic of the 60s up to today in the movies. But honestly, I think probably a lot of it was whatever reference the artist had handy. And I mean, Siegel and Schuster were from the Midwest. They were from Cleveland, and they mentioned New York. But would surprise me if they just used, there was no internet. There was, you had a, artists used to have what they called swipe files. They saw a good picture of a car or a building or a ostrich or whatever and they could clear it out, and they'd have these filing cabinets full of reference. So, I mean, if you were, especially in the early days, Superman guys were living in Cleveland, they probably based a lot of it on Cleveland, or a lot of it was a sort of generic skyscrapers. But I think I would have to say that Gotham was New York, given that the people created were from New York publishers.
Gotham is old New York. It's the Lower East Side.
Yeah.
It's the Gothic architecture. It's the industrial deco. Metropolis is more the Nouveau, the Midtown, the neoclassical, the more streamlined stuff. But Fun fact: Joe Shuster. Sorry.
Where we are, where we're filming today is on the Grand Concourse, which is famous for these.
Neoclassical.
Kubo.
Deco.
Deco,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is that a apartment building right
And
there?
Deco comes in two periods, right? There's the more streamlined, pretty, the angel wings and flowers and palm trees, and then there's the more industrial nuts and bolts stuff. So it has two periods in itself. Um,
The Grand Concourse would become sort of a cliche in my Jewish humor. Actually, it's modeled on the Champs-Élysées. That's the where we are is the Champs-Élysées of New York.
Gabriel? So in a way, the Art Deco of the Grand Concourse was very likely, it's part of the cultural stew. It was very likely in the back, if not the front, of Bill Finger's mind and Bob Kane's mind as they created Gotham. It's very likely part of that inspiration.
But I think it was also, the era of the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building. That too, like with the state Gotham. The mythic New York, the darkness and the shadows. And Anton first, they just to the extreme to the Batman movies, right? With that decor, the sanctifies where you literally would not see the sky. Is that? So, I say more than, anything outside the Marvel Universe. Yeah, that certainly is. Not as there.
Would you say the 70s is when Gotham started getting, iconic gargoyles and cathedrals?
I think it goes back. I think it goes back to Jerry Robinson. You know, Bob Kane. Bob Kane was very smart. Bob Kane saw Siegel and Schuster did pretty well at first. They were paid fairly well for creating Superman, but they never owned a part of it. And at a certain point, there were a lot of lawsuits, and they ended up, it's a very sad story. Their heirs now have, recouped some of it, and there's some equity that's happening. But for a period, they were virtually destitute, and Bob Kane learned from their example, and he, for various reasons, he was able to get a better deal. Or even he, did not amass the kind of wealth that you would think the person who co-created, and was a trader of record for Batman would have. But his model, what a lot of the early creators wanted was a syndicated newspapers too. Those guys were the rock stars of their day. So comic books was never a goal. The goal was if you had that skill set as an artist and a writer, wanted to have Dick Tracy, Peanuts, Steve Tagline, or something like that. So King and all those people, because of the volume of work they had to do at studios, so they would have done the main figures, and they would supervise, make sure it look feel. So Kane took that role model. So I'd say a lot of the artists working on this team, notably Jerry Robinson, but also Dick Sprang and that was some of the others.
Those are the big two names I can think of.
So I think they gave the look and feel to Batman of the city. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think that was, that's where that came from. Ironically, I think a lot of those guys ended up working in suburbs. Yeah, I think they knew the city all too well and wanted to, get out and have a little bit of breathe, peace and quiet. So I think ultimately they all became those weird. I say weird in the sense that, I think every comic creator has a story of like people couldn't quite figure out what they did because while all the other suburban dads got on the computer train and went into the city for their jobs, these guys would like hang around. They didn't seem interested in pursuing their wives, but so they kind of know. But they would just like sit home all day. What are those guys doing?
It wasn't the thing it is today, so it was just odd. But what Danny talked about, I think, is a good segue to the relationship of Bob Kane and Bill Finger and what happened. They ended up with two very different fates because of the relationship they had in creating Batman. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster were partners. They co-created Superman together. It doesn't matter who originated what part of it, but they created it together. And then after creating him, they took him to DC and sold him. It was different with Bob Kane, Bill Finger, and Daddy speak.
Yeah. Uh, well, you know, look, they sold the rights right away, so in that sense, it was still worth for hire. But I think we talk about work for hire. We talk about a lot of these things that accommodate commercial art as if they were, you know, written in the Ten Commandments. So, you know, as if those five commandments that Mel Brooks dropped were like, oh, that was the work for hire part, you know. Um, but that didn't exist. They were making that. I think every deal was being made up. The preference among the publishers, of course, is that they own all the rights. But there was a period when the creators, there was wiggle room. Creators could make different deals. Those very early years. And so Bob Kane, you know, the myth is that Kane's father was a lawyer or an accountant. My understanding that Kane's father was a printer who worked at the New York Daily News. And so he saw the kind of money that successful syndicated cartoonists made. So he was, you know, at least he was able to say to his son, protect yourself and get a lawyer and get an accountant. And so he did. But Finger was never his partner. Finger, I guess, was his employee as part of the studio. And I don't know if they had a, you know, no, that I don't know if they ever had a falling out per se, or I think Finger, Finger was chronically late in his deadline. Famous. He's actually being very imaginative, very creative, and putting out a pretty good volume of work, but was very often late and found himself in a position to where have to like ask his editors to give him an advance, and then he ended up just owing money on working at not yet. Did he have an alcohol issue?
He did. He ended up dying in 1974 at the age of 60.
I think just before.
59. Penniless and an alcoholic.
You know, he had to talk Tyler Double. He's done incredible research on Bill's a little older than Bob Kane also. So I think for Bill isn't working as a shoe sale. So I think having a chance to work even as an employee was, I'm sure, thrilling for him. And there was a certain point where Kane you know, the comic said through the 60s by Bob Kane, even though he had custody for years, but he negotiated a deal where he got X dollars per month just for having I think he wasn't allowed to work on any other comic book, did other projects. You know, Bob Kane, it's funny, you know, there's many people when they die, the stories told about them become more like hagiographies, and they're idealized. For better or worse, Bob Kane, since he passed away, the stories about him only become worse and more egregious. But in both cases, the truth is very hard to ascertain, you know. But there's a lot of bad stories about him. But the fact is, he came up with the name and he brought Finger in. But the fact that Bob has the foresight, and I think he had a lot of personal appeal to it. People found him charming in a way that maybe they didn't. Jerry and Joe, that I don't know, but it seems like Bob had some personal charm, and so was able to negotiate the politics of corporate art.
I think like
Savoir-faire.
my phone's like really low on battery, and it's already been almost an hour. So,
Okay.
you know, but one last thing I want to talk about is the Bill Finger street name.
So, do you want me to give you something, a segue to that?
Sure.
Okay. Nonetheless, the fact remained that Bob Kane went up to become pretty affluent. He hobnobbed with the likes of Sammy Davis Jr., Muhammad Ali, Francis Ford Coppola, Fidel Castro for some reason, got a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Bill Finger, you know, died penniless and obscure as an alcoholic. But then sort of a campaign within the industry by Mark Taylor Nobleman.
Kane had several marriages, but in one of them he had a son, and that son had a daughter, and that was Athena Finger, who was very active in wanting to resurrect and every of Bill Finger alive, and to get him credited as the co-creator of Batman.
There's a documentary called Batman and Bill on Hulu, came out in 2017 about that whole process where they recommend. But the bottom line is in October 2015, DC added Bill Finger, and since then, every appearance of Batman in comics or other media says created by Bob Kane with Bill Finger. And in December 2017, they named a street after him, which is what we're going to go to next.
Was that Mark Douglas? Was that Andy Mark's thing?
Yeah.
So this Mark Talanoa became very nested and involved in seeing justice done. There's a book called Batman and Bill that he wrote as a Ty Templeman drew. But yeah, so I was here on that on the day that they unveiled the street sign and the Bronx borough president and some other
The Times photo.
That's right.
I think give me that date so I can find out.
And yeah, it was a very nice ceremony, and so this is called the Bill Finger Way, I think.
The Fingerway on 192nd East and Grand Concourse. We're going to go see it now.
I mean, is there? I think only because this game is running long. I mean, I think you guys said so much great stuff. Is there anything that you feel that hasn't been added that needs to be said that you want to say or want to contribute?
So yeah, I'm covering a lot of.
You did. You got great.
You got some detail for us about PAX too, but
Oh, wait. Oh,